All right, YouTube, welcome back for our Black Kaldheim review video. We're going to be talking about every single black card and discussing its value for limited. So I've got our same co-host, Yanks. He's big in Japan. So let's go ahead and start. We're going to aim for about an hour on these cards, so we're going to kind of move a bit quickly. So we've got Blood on the Snow. Choose one, destroy all creatures, destroy all planeswalkers, then return a creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of snow spent.
Yeah, so you get a 6-mana Wrath. Destroying all planeswalkers probably isn't going to come up in limited, but can't hurt to have that as the option. Still going to play a 6-mana Wrath even if I can't get the snow benefit, but if I can, this card becomes great.
Yeah, I would argue you need to be consistently hitting at least 2 snow for it to be relevant.
So, yes. All right. Yeah, agreed.
So not a slight amount of snow, a, like, snow business.
Yeah, I agree. You need to hit at least 2, preferably 3, to start getting something good back from the graveyard. But it's still a board wipe, which, you're always happy to have that reset button.
Also, a 6-mana kill a planeswalker, like, it's got some flexibility. That's expensive to kill a planeswalker for sure, but if you need to do it, you need to do it. Just the fact that you have that option is pretty big.
Yeah, agreed. Planeswalkers can be tricky permanents to answer and will be worth the 6 mana to get rid of.
So I think it's, slightly worse, is a bit more expensive than a Wrath of God, but it's got some more flexibility, and definitely if you can get some snow permanents, then it is looking pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I think you're talking about like probably like a 3.5, and then this if you got a lot of snow, then this is probably the best card you've got.
Yeah, it's definitely very good if you have a lot of snow. It's got a reasonable amount of upside, so I don't know. What did we give the white board wipe? The 5-mana one?
I think it was around a 4. But that one also could be had the foretell benefit.
That made it cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the planeswalker thing isn't super common for limited, but I mean, I do really like the flexibility. So I'm in the 3.5 range.
Yeah. Either.
Bloodsky Berserker. It is a human berserker. 1/1 for 2, not great on the stats front. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. It gains menace until end of turn. So it gets counters, not temporary buffs. So this thing is actually going to get very big and out of hand very quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting to see this effect in black. That's not the color I was expecting to have the second spell effect, but it's a cheap card. Again, this can be your first spell, and then the next spell you cast that turn will instantly make it a 3/3. So if you play this on like turn 4 or turn 5, you have a good chance of getting a 3-drop or a 2-drop plus a 3/3. Now you only get the menace on a turn then that you can't attack, but
that's okay.
You can also trigger it again later.
So it looks like the mechanic we were expecting to see in Orzhov is actually, or in Azorius, is actually an Orzhov type new mechanic, which is interesting. I was definitely expecting to see that in blue as well, which is, the draw additional cards is typically what we see. Actually, before it was in like the Izzet colors, right?
Yeah, and it makes me wonder where the rest of the life gain support is if it's not in Orzhov, because it probably doesn't have both.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was in green.
Maybe it does.
It wouldn't surprise me if it was in green, because green does have some life gain from time to time.
Yeah, it would be an interesting change of pace.
But also, each color does typically have 2 types of decks. So, like in the white, it was second card and life gain. So it would be weird to have both types of decks be in the same 2-color matches.
Exactly.
So it should be thrown off if this is where we're seeing the new Orzhov. I think this goes very nicely. You play this on 2, and then on 3 you play another 2-drop plus that 1-drop cleric that we saw that puts a +1/+1 counter if he's the second spell you're playing on 3. That is just an aggressive powerhouse turn, which will absolutely crush people, because then you're putting a counter on this. It becomes a 4/4, and you're attacking with it on turn 3 on the play or some nonsense. Like, oh boy.
Yeah, it means that you could very well have Orzhov be a pretty aggressive color combination, which is not something we've seen recently. We have at times in the past, but not in the last few sets.
I like this card actually a lot. Because the fact that it's counters, not temporary buffs, it's something that's permanent. So even if you're only getting one trigger out of it, it is a fair amount of value on a 2/2. So it becomes a 3/3 for 2 with some upside in the late game if you're able to like redraw some cards. So I'm a big fan.
Yeah, you only need one trigger for this to be a good card. So yeah, I think this does need some setup, and it's a bad top deck late game when you're empty handed, but most 2-drops are anyway.
Agreed.
So it's I'm gonna a little bit worse than the last card we saw. So if that was say a 3.5, maybe this is a 3.
I also have this at a 3. It's a 2-drop that I'm very happy to have.
Agreed.
All right, your turn.
Burning Rune Demon. We have a 6-mana 6/6 4 black for a Demon Berserker with flying. When Burning Room Demon enters the battlefield, you may search your library for exactly 2 cards not named Burning Room Demon that have different names. If you do, reveal them. And an opponent chooses one of them, that goes into your hand, the other one goes into your graveyard, and then you shuffle.
Interesting. It's a 6/6 flyer for 6 that gets you the second best card in your deck.
Yep.
Depending on how good the cards are, you might want to get 2 medium cards, not 2 big bombs, and throw one in the yard, but...
Yeah, you could get 2, or you might need a removal spell, so you get 2 different removal spells. So they have to give you one of them. Or a card that has graveyard synergy. There's a bunch of different options that you can choose depending on what you've got in your deck. But 6-mana 6/6 flyer on its own that is on its own is good, and it is providing card advantage.
It is.
It might not be the specific card you want because you're going to get whichever of the 2 is worse for you in that situation. Most of the time, I mean, opponents can make mistakes, but it's still replacing itself with one of the better cards in your deck while leaving behind a 6/6 flyer.
It's a bit on the expensive side, but like a 6-drop in a limited draft or sealed is just fine if that's your top end of your deck. I'm pretty happy to run this. It seems huge and awesome. It's a Demon Berserker, which we haven't seen a lot of overlap with, so synergy wise for creature type probably not much, but I mean,
but we've only seen 3 black cards, and that's 2 berserkers already.
That's true. Berserker might be
I could see Berserker as a Rakdos thing.
Potentially, yeah, I agree with that.
But yeah, I mean, card has to be answered, and even if it does get answered, you've got a card left. So, but I'm thrilled with this card. I'm first picking it, playing it in every sealed deck. I don't know. This is like
Agreed.
a 4/5.
A 4.5.
4.5. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I put it at... I guess it depends what you're getting. I guess if the quality of the card you're getting is big, then it's insane. If you decide to pick something a little bit more run of the mill, so you're not pitching some of your better cards and you increase the quality of your card draw overall, it's 4 is if they answer it, but it's gonna win the game if it's not answered because it's so huge. So I agree, it is a 4/5.
Yep.
Just its base stats alone is massive. Did I skip one? Okay. Crippling Fear, guys. It's a 4-mana sorcery. It's a rare. Choose a creature type. Creatures that aren't the chosen type get -3/-3. So it's a low-end board wipe. It is nice against aggressive decks. I would probably still play it in most, and you don't have to have a ton of creature synergy to make this worth it, because you can just play around it like you can any board wipe.
Yeah, I'm playing this in probably every deck, unless somehow, and we haven't seen enough of them, unless somehow like my entire deck is changelings, in which case they're all dying to this. But that's gonna be such a rare case that I'm thinking I'm playing this in every deck.
But both changelings we saw were X4s, right?
I think the rare one was a
commons.
3/3. The commons were 2/4 and 1/4. Yeah, you're right.
So, I mean, yes, you could have mythic changelings that might die to it, but then boo-hoo, you are playing rares into your mythics and nonsense, and you're probably winning, so... That seems more corner case. I think most of the changelings we saw so far.
Chad is correcting me, and they're right. I'm misreading this. They're actually... Changelings are completely safe from this card.
Creatures that aren't the chosen type.
Yeah, I misread the card.
But I see what you're going for, because typically I actually read it correctly, and then when you said the thing, I was like, oh, I must have misread it correctly, and then I just jumped onto your bandwagon.
Yep.
Because I think the way you thought of it is the way it typically is. Creatures of a chosen type get -2/-2 kind of thing.
Yeah, I just I don't know what I was thinking. Either that or I don't know. I'm just wrong.
I think that's
That being said,
a reasonable thing to like, flip around. It's pretty common to have either or.
yeah. But that being said, that was a corner case anyway, and as you pointed out, they were X4s, so it wouldn't have mattered. Nope, this card is good. It's cheap. Uh, for its effect, 4 mana. That's going to probably generate 2 or 3 for 1. A lot of the times.
It's a bit situational. You have to set it up. It's not a grand slam by any means, but pretty happy to run it in every deck. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's right around a 3. Potentially, if the format is aggressive enough, it could be higher. If you get if especially if Rakdos or Boros, or if Rakdos is really aggressive as well. Orzhov seems to be more aggressive than we thought, so maybe there are more aggro decks than usual.
Yeah, it is nice that you can play around it, but you always do leave yourself open to it being a dead card just because you have better board presence. But that's kind of the way it is with any board clear. So
yeah, and it's just not going to be good in the late game if you're top decking and they draw something big.
All right, we got Knell Berserker. It's an elf berserker. When it dies, if its power was 3 or greater, get a 2/2. So it does need to be pumped somehow.
Yep, this needs to be so like you said, it needs to be pumped, it needs to be bigger for it to trigger, but if you can get that trigger, you're getting a decent body. You're not getting a 1/1, you're getting a 2/2 that's left behind. And this is our third berserker, and it leaves a berserker. So I have to imagine berserker
Is a thing. Yeah. So is this maybe potentially that really aggressive Orzhov with that spell cleric that we saw earlier, the 1/1 that when you play a second spell you get the counter, which is triggering the other thing. So you play the uncommon on 2 that gets +2/+2 when you play a second spell, and then on 3 you play this and the 1/1 putting a +1/+1 counter on this, sending for 3. On turn 3 you've got 2 3/3s and a 1/1, right? Like, and these are just, that's 1 uncommon and 2 commons. It's going to be pretty easy to set up. It's very aggressive.
Yeah, you can get a very aggressive start, it's looking like, with these decks. And that's before we've seen if there's anything that gives berserkers +1/+0 or something like that.
So I don't love this card if you're thinking you've got a bunch of pump spells and you can like pump it in combat and leave a body. It's not great, but it's like a 2 for me. But if you've got some good counter synergy, which you might have in green, we saw one thing in white. Also we saw the board, like the overall pumps in white, where it's like if you attack, pay 2, pump your whole board. So that will also trigger on this as well. So when they do trade with it, you get your dude behind. So that's really nice. It seems to go very well with an Orzhov deck.
Yeah, I think it's on its face it's a 2. I think it's if Rakdos Berserkers is a thing, or if Golgari Elves are a thing, which is Golgari has been an elf tribe in the past. It could potentially be part of 2 different tribal decks. So it's definitely got some upside, but on its face it's a grizzly bear, with a little bit of upside.
Yep. Yeah, the 2 decks you mentioned and the Orzhov deck seems like it has a lot of potential homes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it could fit in very well.
Demonic Gifts. Until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So it trades up potentially, and then brings your creature back. ETB effects are great with these kinds of cards, but even then it's still fine. It's still a 1/1. Even if you're not using it in combat, what's really nice is you can just play it in response to a removal spell and protect your bombs.
Yeah, what's interesting is this is just a strictly worse version of a card from Amonkhet and Supernatural Stamina. That's same exact effect, but only cost a black. So I'm surprised they printed it so recently with just a more expensive version of the same card. And that card wasn't particularly great.
See, I didn't know that one, but Unlikely Aid, someone in chat said, and I do remember that one.
Yeah, I guess technically this comes back untapped as opposed to Supernatural, which left it tapped, so it's not strictly worse, but it effectively is.
No, I mean, it's hard to compare things to cards from other sets because is it worse if the rest of the cards in the set are weaker, right? So
yeah, true. This is going to 1/1 a lot of the times, either via removal or forcing a trade that then it comes back, your creature comes back. So it's playable, but I'm not excited about it.
Yeah, I think if you have bombs or something large to protect, if it negates a big removal spell from your opponent, that's also pretty valuable.
Yeah.
That
See
said, it's
that.
still a combat trick. I'm not in love with it, but I mean, I think it's like a 2/5 with the flexibility that it has.
Yeah, I think I have it more as a 2. But we're not that far off. And I'm usually lower on combat tricks than you.
Yep, definitely. Dogged Pursuit.
Yep. Dogged Pursuit is a 3 and a black enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So I have a feeling this is going to be a card that people argue about whether or not it's good for the entirety of the format.
Yeah, we saw that
Um,
before with the one that you could blow up for 6 and drain 4 as well. It's basically the same card, costs the same too, I think, to play.
yeah, that was ill-gotten gains. Ill-gotten
Inheritance, yeah.
Yeah. Not having that ability to just kill somebody at 4 is a big deal.
I agree with that, but it does also end step, so it triggers a bit earlier, a turn earlier. Not great.
Yes, it does. It triggers, 1 turn earlier.
Also, I don't know, were there a lot of like if we pair this with white, the added life gain to potentially trigger cards that say, if you're over 25 life, then you get this bonus. So that could be a nice thing. The biggest thing I think with this card compared, when looking at how people perceived ill-gotten inheritance is it was either terrible or it was great depending on the pro you were listening to. I think the biggest issue is that people who listened to the pro that said it was great would play it in every deck, and they would lose games because they had a poor curve and they weren't able to utilize these types of cards. They would just jam this on like an empty, unprotected board, and they would just keep taking damage to the face and not be able to protect it. So I think knowing when these cards are good and when they fit in your deck and when your deck can sustain playing these on 4 or 5 is really, really important.
Yeah, like this is a terrible card in a control deck. Because you can't, you're probably slower out of the gate and you can't afford to be spending, your turn 4 doing this. Effectively draining for 1. Like at the top end of an aggressive curve, that damage can add up if you're also, if this is actually putting pressure on them rather than just like trying to use it to survive a little bit longer.
Or if you're a more controlling deck that does have a decent early game with a bunch of 1/3s or 2/4s, where you're just kind of stonewalling the ground, and then you can play this behind a bit of a wall, that can be a decent way to win as well. It just depends. You can't, like he said, be slow out of the gate and be unprotected.
Yeah, I think even that's difficult. Just because you need to be doing damage some other way. That's why that 4 was big, because getting that, that's a difference of 4 turns of this, right? That you can just end the game.
Definitely, but it's at that point that means you were probably like, I felt like by the time I got them to 4, I was already in a position where I've stabilized and this thing was eating away at them. That 4 never really, like, very rarely was like, okay, if I can't crack this, they're gonna kill me on the next turn. It already felt like it was a landslide in my direction.
No, but the 4 forced them to change the way they play, because they can't take damage and try to race as easily.
Definitely. I mean, an added bonus is always helpful.
Yeah, but I think this card is gonna. I actually think this card is gonna be pretty bad. I think I'm not playing this card outside of the most aggressive of decks.
Okay, yeah, I'm a little bit more lenient on it, but
I guess, or if and we haven't seen where it is, if there's enough life gain synergy. But I think in your generic black deck, you're not going to want this.
okay. It does sound like I am a bit on the lighter side for it, or higher side for it, I should say, but I'm not much higher. I'm like a 2/5. Most decks, I'm not happy to run it, but it'll make it into a lot of decks just because of, I think it's probably still better than, some generic filler if I've got a decent curve already.
Yeah, I mean, yep.
I put it down for a 2 for the article.
Yep, I would probably have it at a 1/5, but we're not super far apart. Next up is Draugr Necromancer. It's a 4-mana 4/4, 3 and a black for a snow creature zombie cleric at rare. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. You may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponent's own with ice counters on them, and you may spend mana from snow sources as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells.
Seems
So
good.
yeah. Basically, what that means is their creatures die, they get exiled instead of going to the graveyard, and you can play them.
It even looks like the Game of Thrones art, right? Like it looks
Yes.
like the
Oh yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's the what is it, the Winter King, or I'm forgetting what his actual name is.
yes.
Night King. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these cards typically will have that spend mana as though or any color, and you can spend any mana. So restricting that to snow makes it a little worse. But um, that being said, I'm still actually playing this in any deck, including a non-snow deck, because if I'm blue-black and I'm playing against blue-green, half the cards I exile I'm going to be able to cast. And it's still a 4-mana 4/4 on its face.
Yeah, it's a 4-mana 4/4 is already fine, but also you can keep in mind, let's say you don't have any snow lands. You're still exiling cards, which is removing any synergies your opponents might have with removing cards out of their graveyard or recursion type effects. Like there was another creature where you could cast it, board clear, use snow lands, return a creature with CMC or whatever, right? So if all those creatures are exiled, you're just kind of negating a couple of those. It'll be a little fringe, but it's a great body that just has a fringe benefit.
Yeah. And, more than half the time you're going to play against something that you can cast at least some of their creatures.
Yeah, and you don't need a ton of snowlands for this to be relevant either. Really, you just need the one. If you can find one snowland, most things cost one color and colorless, so you can then use that one snowland very flexibly and cast anything you need. So 2 snowlands in your deck, and this guy is great.
Yeah. Agreed.
I'm in the 4/5. If you get this, I don't think it's going to be hard to get snowlands, and I think it'll be amazing. He has to survive, but...
Yeah, I think it's a 4 just because it doesn't provide any lasting impact if it gets killed right away, but it's still very good.
Yeah, I mean, usually my 5s are, they will win the game if they are unresolved, like unanswered, right? For any amount of time. So this kind of feels very similar to me, where it's like, okay, they can kill your 6/6 dragon that we gave a 5. They can kill this just the same. It does take a little longer in that you have to then cast it, but it's got so much staying power.
Yeah, I think the difference for me for the dragon is if they kill it, you're still up a card. This you're not.
How are you up a card?
Because the dragon, you got a card out of your deck.
I wasn't talking about any dragon specifically. I was just talking about...
Oh, I thought you meant the 6/6 one, the demon we talked about like 4 cards ago. That's what
that's not a dragon.
It's a demon. Yeah, it's a big flying thing.
There's also in red that everybody's talking about, the gold bringer dragon, right? That's insane. It's a 4/4 flyer haste. When it attacks or is targeted, you get a treasure token out of it. Yeah. So you're guaranteed to get a 1/1, right? If you play it and then they answer it right away, you get that treasure token. So I don't know, like, I think that staying power is not quite as strong as this one, but it's also a 4/4 flyer that can kill them if they don't answer it. But this is also very good. So
yeah.
Draugr Recruiter. So 3/3 for 3, or 3/3 for 4. Sorry, we're seeing a ton of things with those stats in that slot. So we're going to be seeing a lot of 3/3 trades across the board. It has Boast, first black Boast for 4. Return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Holy shite!
Yeah, that's expensive cost, but a heck of an ability.
Yeah, I mean, it has to survive. You get it at least once.
Yeah. Yep. As long as you can attack with it, you can trigger it once.
If you've got, a decent amount of removal to clear the way for this, or the blue enchantment to give it flying or whatever, like, all right, that's some good recursion. I like it.
Yeah. It's going to be hard to not necessarily for the black removal, although we haven't seen it, but usually it's reasonably expensive. It's going to be hard to cast it and activate the ability in the same turn, but that's fine. You can get it through once, and then the next turn you can activate it when you attack again. So, yeah, I think this card's very good.
It's a really nice late game mana sink. Even if you don't get it through and you just get a big bomb back, pretty happy with it.
Yeah, this card is great
yeah.
for limited. It's still underpowered stats, so it's not a bomb, and it's which you wouldn't expect at common. But this is in the solid 3.5 range.
Mm-hmm. I have it at a 3 just because it's not winning the game on its own. There's going to be a lot of times where it's nothing worth getting back, or they just remove it before you get to activate the ability.
Sure, you might be spending 4 mana to get back a 2/2, which is still a card advantage, but not game breaking by any means.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, the more high dollar targets you have, the better this is. The more low costing removal spells you have, the better this is. If you're just like, feed the swarm your guy, bash you, get my dude back, then like that gets out of hand really quickly. All right, moving on. We got a helm.
Yep, Draugr's Helm. It's 1 and a black for an equipment. When Draugr's Helm enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 and a black, so 5 mana total. If you do, create a 2/2 black zombie berserker creature token and attach this to it. And this, the effect of the equipment is it gets +2/+2 and has menace.
So it's a 4/4 menace for 5, which isn't terrible, but the equip cost is quite expensive.
Yeah, the equip for 4 is pretty bad. But if you're solely looking at this as a 5 mana 4/4 menace, you're gonna play that in most decks. With relevant creature type, likely in zombie berserker. You are probably not ever going to re-equip it. But sometimes you get late game in top deck wars, and it's just it turns every one of your creatures into a threat.
It does, yeah. I'm not happy to run it. I like that these all have that initial cost. None of them, even the white one that you didn't like, none of the costs seemed outrageous for what you get on its face when you first cast it. All of the equip costs have been kind of expensive, but this one is the most expensive, but I feel like you are getting a lot. +2/+2 and menace adds a ton, especially if you've got like creature decks and stuff. And, there are a lot of games that go very late, especially in sealed pools, right? This is going to be very, very playable in a sealed pool, I think, just because each top deck, and a lot of that's going to depend on how fast the format ends up being as well, but I don't hate these. I'm not happy to run any of them.
Yeah, I think I'm happiest to run this out of the 3 we've seen so far, but that's still putting it at like filler range for me.
Yep, so I'm in the like 1.52 range.
Yeah, I'm probably at a 2.
All right, Dread Rider. We've got a 6 mana 4/7, pay 2 exile creature card from your graveyard. Target opponent loses 3 life. 3 life is kind of a lot if you have no other like interactions with your graveyard. Like every turn you just pew them for 2 mana.
Yeah, it's nice to have something like a 3/7 like this with as large of a toughness, that can be effectively a vigilance attacker, in that it can sit back and block, and then you can activate it at end of turn.
Yes.
It's a great finisher for a stalled board. And it helps to stall that board on its own for you.
Yeah.
You do need to have creatures in your yard. So there is a limit to how many times you can activate this, but late game you're likely to have some in there. But you are going to want to play this in a 15 to 16 creature deck, not an 11 to 12 creature deck.
I definitely agree with that, and you don't want a whole lot of other interactions with your graveyard.
Yes.
It is 6 mana. It's a bit on the expensive side, and by itself, it's not really winning you the game because it's pretty easy to block a 3/7 when you get to that amount of mana, right? It is going to block just about everything, which is really nice. I think I'm fine to run this on a top end if my deck doesn't really have any other more like expensive things, if my deck's pretty low end. But the 6 mana sticker does kind of scare me, but 3 damage is a lot, so.
Yeah, I think you're never playing more than one of these, and you're not playing it over other good finishers, but it gives reach to decks that might not have it otherwise. So I'm okay playing this card. It's filler, but it's useful filler at the top end. The downside is usually you can find good expensive cards to play. It's good cheap cards that are hard to find.
Yep. What are you looking at for this card?
I'm at a 2 with this. I'll play it, but I don't want more than one ever.
I am also at a 2. All right, let's go. Why do the black cards have so much text on them?
Yeah, good old Dream Devourer. It's an 0/3 for 1 and a black. It's a demon cleric. Each non-land card in your hand without foretell has foretell, and its foretell cost is equal to its mana cost reduced by 2.
Okay.
Whenever you foretell a card, Dream Devourer gets +2/+0 until end of turn.
The pump
So
ability is meh, but the turning things into foretell is kind of nice. Makes every card really flexible. But actually, oh no, yeah. So it just makes it so that all the cards cost the same. You can just foretell them and break it up over 2 turns.
yeah, what I'm interested to see how exactly this card plays out in paper, because the memory issues with remembering what cards you might have foretold with this um, could be kind of awkward. I guess it's if it didn't have foretell, you would know, but um,
Oh, you're saying like they should be on the side, like in the adventure area, right? You're talking about
sure.
placement?
Well, I'm just saying if you have cards that are actually foretold and these cards that are foretold as well.
It shouldn't matter,
Uh,
right? They both cost the same.
they cost the same. They cost the 2. Um, but anyway, it's not a big deal because I guess the other ones will all have their cost on them. This one you'll just have to remember that it's the actual cost -2 to then play.
Yes.
Um,
So if this is, what happens if this card's removed? Do those cards die?
no, they
No.
keep the ability.
That's an interesting thing, though. The way it's worded, you would think it would almost no longer have that ability. But yes.
Yes, it's. I'm very interested to see when they print the rules update for foretell how things are worded, because it's an interesting mechanic like that.
No, you can relook at the cards. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be difficult to figure out which ones were foretold with this and which ones were not, just because it doesn't change the cost at all. It'll either have a foretell cost on its own, or you just have to remember that it costs 2 less because of this card, even if this card is removed, which can potentially make it a little bit weird.
Yeah, I think I was mistaking the fact that this doesn't affect cards that already have foretell, where it could change the mana cost. So since it doesn't do that, then yes, it won't be a problem like I was initially thinking.
I think this card's okay. I'm not a huge fan of it. It does make things um interesting. You could take instant spells that aren't foretell cards and cast them for cheaper. It's just weird. It's gonna make things difficult to play around when you're looking at foretells.
Yeah, I think I don't know, it's more of a mind games card than
It could make some really
anything else.
expensive things come down very quickly, right? Like your 6-drop just comes out on turn 4.
On turn 4. Yeah, yeah, it can definitely speed up some of your more expensive things. Um, this card is just weird. I don't even know how to particularly rate it. It's certainly playable. Because it's going to do something. I mean, you're going to foretell some things, and you're going to have a 2 mana 2/3 on some turns, which is fine.
Yep.
Um,
I'm in that
but
2/5 range. I feel like
yeah,
it could make your deck very aggressive.
this is, I feel like, probably the cards so far we've seen we're most likely to be wrong about in either direction.
I
just
can
because
say
it's
that.
just because it's so weird.
I agree with
um,
that.
but yeah, so I'm definitely in that 2/5 middle ground rare space for now.
All right, a 1-mana 1/2 elf berserker with boast. For 1 colorless, target opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So it has to attack to get this to happen. It's not a flyer. So the boast ability is like, you're going to have very minimal amount of chances that you can get that in. Also, if you are on the play and you play it on turn 1, do you really not want to be playing 2 and 3 drops on your following turns to make this happen? Not a huge fan.
Yeah, I don't like this card at all unless you're full of ways to give it evasion or um
It's
and even then it's a minimal effect.
typically you see things like this with crew. Anytime this creature is tapped, it does it. You can pay 1. Then I'd be more okay with it because there are vehicles in the set. But the fact that you have to attack just makes it so difficult to control, and it's pretty minimal to like make it a payoff if you just run it into something.
Yeah, I'm sticking this pretty much at a 1.
Agreed.
There could be some hyper aggressive deck or hyper tribal deck that wants it, but it's going to be down on the list for any of those too.
All right, elderfang disciple. When elderfang disciple enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. So it's a 1/1 for 2 that discards, so it's a rat. It's an elf cleric rat.
Yep.
It's got some synergies.
Yeah, those cards are playable if there's some sort of if there's anything that wants to sacrifice things.
Yep.
These cards are usually good.
Anything with recursion or ETB effects or flicker effects, or the card that like lets you duplicate your cards and make counters of them. It's fine. I put it at a 2. I typically like rat well enough, and it's got some elf cleric synergies. Could get pumped from an emblem or something weird.
Yeah, I think it's a 2. You're gonna get a card's worth of value out of this. So.
All right, moving right along. We're at 35. We're doing okay.
All right, next up is Eradicator Valkyrie. It's a 4/3 for 4, 2 black at Mythic. It's an Angel Berserker that has flying, lifelink, and hexproof from planeswalkers. It also has Boast, 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. So it's got a lot going on. 4 mana, 4/3 flying, lifelink on its own. It's pretty darn good. I don't think we particularly care too much about hexproof from planeswalkers here, in limited, but it's an upside, as small as it is. Boast, that ability can be good.
Yeah, it's like a rankle, right?
Yeah, it has spots where it's good. It works well with Elderfang Disciple that we just saw. You got your card of value already out of that, and now you can sack the 1/1 and get hopefully another card of value out of them.
4 mana, 4/3 lifelink flyer. I'm on board.
Yeah.
The rest of the text box could be blank for all I care.
Agreed. Yeah, I think. Yeah, exactly. You're going to take the 4 mana, 4/3 flying lifelinker any day of the week.
If you have any way to generate tokens or anything, then you are in business. It's not, it's got a tiny butt. I think most removal spells, including the -3s, which we've seen multiples of. And then red, I think, has 2 things that are 3 damage or more, at least 3.
Yep.
So it's going to be pretty vulnerable, but if unanswered, it's a 4 mana, a 4 power flyer, which is going to win you games. So I'm not in the 5 range because it's, like I said, pretty easy to remove, and it doesn't have any staying power if it gets removed. It's not haste. You're not guaranteed to get hits. It doesn't leave behind counters or tokens or anything like that. So I'm in the 4 to 4.5 range. It's going to win you a game if it's not answered, but not the hardest thing to answer.
Yeah, I'm in the exact same spot as you. It's not the bombiest of bombs, but I'm thrilled to have it.
If you've got some good token generation or anything, and you're able to utilize the boast nicely, then it's going to definitely crush people, and you'll get some really good value out of it. If you can sack a 1/1 and have them just even sack a 3/3, then boom, it's going to go up in value huge.
Absolutely.
All right, moving right along. Feed the Serpent, 4 mana, exile target creature or planeswalker. This is just our instant cast premium black removal. I'm in that 4 boat for our.
Yep, it's on the top side for what we normally see here. It's reasonably priced. It's an instant and it exiles.
Yep, all the things we like to see. All right, we got a draugr. I always say that wrong, I think. 3 mana, 3/2 base stats right there. I'm willing to play this at a 2. For 1 and a snow, it gets +1/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. So it's also a snow creature, which is, something we've seen. We can fish them out, we can search for them, we can reveal the top of our library. There are things that want snow things in play that will trigger that as well. So it's got a ton of snow synergies and a decent ability as well.
Yeah, you said the stats on its own are a 2. I think the ability bumps it up a little bit. It is a berserker as well, which the more we see of them, the more I assume that black-red is going to be a berserker deck. They do exist in red berserkers. I just don't know what the payoffs are. And the ability itself is nice. I've got this at like a 2/5.
Yeah, I also have it at a 2/5, but if there's anything I have that really wants me to be having some snow stuff on board, I'm much happier to play this card.
Agreed.
All right, Hailstorm Valkyrie. What's up?
Nope, good.
Hailstorm Valkyrie. We have a flying trampler. Watch out for that 2/2 trampler. For 4, 2 snow mana of any color, and it gets +2/+2 till end of turn, and you can pump that multiple times if you get it. So, I mean, I'm already okay with a 2/2 for 3 with that flies. So this is 1 extra mana for the pump ability. You're not happy with it if you're not in the snow section, but if you are, you know, you don't even have to have that many snow to make this relevant. You don't have to hit it every turn, and it's still good enough. You just have to, you know, hit it enough of the times. And if you are, you know, very deep into the snow, this is a really cheap buff, especially considering it has trample.
Yeah, I don't, unlike some of the other snow cards, like, I do not want to play this if I don't have reliable 2 snow mana. It's just too expensive for a 2/2 if I can't activate it. But if I can reasonably expect to get 2 snow lands, yeah. I mean, just the threat of making it a 4/4 will change the way they have to play and block. And then sometimes you activate it, sometimes you don't, and play, you know, your 5-drop on curve. So I think this is a, you know, a lot of the snow ones are going to have ranges. But you know, this is, you know, 1.5 to 3, something like that.
Yeah, I was considering even giving it a 1 just because it is an expensive flyer, but I mean, it's an angel, it's a wizard, it's a flyer. For 1 extra mana, it's a snow permanent by itself, so it could trigger other things. It's also like, you know, an angel wizard, which has some good synergies. So yeah, I could bump it up to 1.5, I think.
One thing, and just because I've seen this come up a number of times in the chat, and I'll make sure everybody knows, you have to draft snowlands or open them in sealed to use them. There is a snowland in every pack. It is either a basic or a snow dual in every single pack.
Yes, so it's like that in most sets, and we're actually going to be talking about it at the end as well, and there'll be a YouTube video talking about all of this. The only reason I've seen that question a bunch as well, but I haven't answered it just because it gets asked about every 15 minutes.
Yep, I just agreed. We've just seen a lot of snow in a row recently.
Yeah, black has a ton of it.
Yeah. All right, next up, Haunting Voyage. It's a 6 mana mythic sorcery, 4 black. Choose a creature type. Return up to 2 creature cards of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield. If the spell was foretold, return all creature cards of that type from your graveyard to the battlefield instead. It has foretell for 5 black, so your foretell cost is well more expensive when you include the 2 you have to play originally, for a total of 9.
Yeah, but it could get back a ton of things.
Yep. But this is the first. I think this is the first card we've seen where the foretell, even without the 2, is more expensive.
It's happened, I think, 2 other times.
Okay.
There was 1 or 2 where we were talking about it, and it did go up a little bit. At the very least, the like the angel one that produced angels, just for the base angels, more than if you just cast it for the base angel, right? That was one of them.
Yep.
And there was one other one too. I think one of the blue big crazy spells. I'm not sure which it was. So this card is interesting. It's 6 mana, so you typically see this, the most recent set was like, it actually got cheaper, the Thrill something? I forget what it was called, but it let you bring back 2 creatures essentially for 6 mana, but it got cheaper, so it didn't have any upside. But this allows you to potentially bring a lot more if you've got the synergy for it. I don't think it's going to be hard to get 2 creatures to overlap, just because, like I said, the human berserker, human wizard, there's a ton of overlap between each creature having 2, Thwart the Grave, thank you, having 2 different creature types. Pretty happy for this card. It's a bit pricey. I don't know how often you're going to want to foretell it, but even on its base, just 2 creatures for 6 mana is okay. I will say you're less likely to get a big bomb with it and something, because most of the big bombs are like the weirder classic creature types, like a spirit or something, or demon.
Yep, but one good thing to note there is it's up to 2, so you can use this as 6 mana to get back your big bomb on its own.
Yeah, but that's usually less playable.
Oh yeah, it's an option. And if you have a changeling in the yard, you can get back anything.
It does say battlefield. Normally it doesn't, so that's pretty big.
Yeah, and you can get back any bomb with any changeling, which is nice.
Yes.
So yeah, this is a very powerful card. But you want to have, you don't want this in an aggro deck where you're getting back two drops.
Dudes, yeah.
Yeah. but in your average deck that's not super aggressive, I think you're going to play this on your top end.
Yep. What are you thinking for a score?
I think if you don't have a bunch of changelings, I think this is a 3. If for some reason you do, and there's a potential to get back like 7 creatures, then it could be bumped up. But I think on average, you're going to look around like a 3.
Okay. Yeah. What if you don't have changelings, but you know you can consistently hit the 2 because of the overlap between warriors and berserkers and humans or whatever?
I think that's maybe a little better, but I think it's in the same range just because that makes it really hard to get back a bomb.
I agree with that. Yeah, you're not likely to get bombs.
It's going to often force you to get 2 cards back, but one that you don't really want.
All right, we got Infernal Pet. It is a 3-mana 2/2, bit expensive. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, put a +1/+1 counter on it, and it gains flying until end of turn. That card's really cool. You only need to trigger it once for it to be really relevant. It's a 3-mana 3/3 essentially, and it gains flying for a turn. I like this card.
I do too. Clearly, what cast your second spell means in art is eat a fairy, because that's what it's doing. I guess that's how it gets flying.
Oh, and it's so cute. I like him.
But yeah, any deck that can reasonably trigger this once, and you've got a 3/3, and it flies for that turn, and then every time after that, it's just a growing, scary threat in the air.
Yep, I think you're gonna die to this a lot.
Yeah, agreed.
This little cute guy is gonna kill many people.
I like that. The infernal pet of the infernal spawn of evil.
I'm in the 3 range. What are you thinking?
Yep, same. There are going to be decks where this underperforms, but it's going to kill a lunk.
Yeah, it definitely will underperform, but casting 2 spells is not out of the question a lot of the times. Enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. Oh, okay, we've seen this before.
Yeah, we had the 4-mana 4/2 in Ikoria that Delta that did it for creatures. You don't always see it for planeswalkers, but that's not that relevant.
There was a 3/2 as well that did something similar in another set that also killed planeswalkers, I think.
Yeah, it was in War of the Spark.
Yeah, it was only 3 mana, I think, a 3-mana 3/2.
Yep.
That one was better. This is more akin to that.
Yeah, it was like Vraska's something or other.
Yeah.
But this, it has flash, which is always nice on these. That one didn't, so it can be used to kill
blocked creatures that you blocked with. Yeah.
And foretell making this cheaper to use on an opponent's turn is really nice.
Yeah. Makes it's the same cost, but it's a bit more flexible, so you can dump extra mana into it if you've got the time. You play your 3-drop and this on turn 5. Feels pretty nice.
Yeah. Stats are low, but not completely out of the question when you add flash. So
I like this a lot more if I've got like the 1/3s and stuff like that in my deck. The 1/4 flying bird things that are likely to, they're likely to call my bluff, or I'm able to call their bluff on a pump spell and then use this card without actually losing anything is pretty nice, or token generators. I'm not super excited about it. If I have to like chump my dude and then play this, then you're not really getting a whole lot of value. It's a trade up, but it's also a very expensive 3/2 on the board after the fact. So, large butts.
Yes, yeah. Anytime you got some creatures that are going to bounce off each other, what looks like a safe attack or block is for them is no longer safe.
I'm at a 3. How about you?
Yep, right around a 3. Yeah, I mean, stats aren't great, but especially with foretell, I'm happy to play this card.
Carfell Kennel Master. It is a zombie berserker with a very glorious beard. When Carfell Kennel Master enters the battlefield, up to 2 target creatures each get +1/+1 and gain indestructible till end of turn. So it's a 4/4 for 5. We've seen a cycle of these in every single color so far. This one's got a decent aggressive thing going on. I feel like if you're in that Orzhov aggressive deck, this isn't a bad curve topper.
Yeah. 5-mana 4/4 with an actual, consistent ability that's going to, pretty much be relevant, every time, as long as you got some creatures on the board.
This is up to, so even if you just have one creature, like you're most likely getting in or getting a chump or getting something out of it.
Yeah, you don't care that there's no toughness boost because it gains indestructible,
Mhm.
so it doesn't matter. Again, it's not an exciting card. It's filler, but it's reasonably decent filler.
Agreed. 2/5.
Yep, see there. Um,
Oops, I put 3/5. That's awfully high.
yeah.
I was stupid and I didn't track them down with the white, so I have to go and like rethink about them all.
All right. Next up, we have Coma's Faithful. It's a 3/1 for 2 and a black elf cleric with lifelink. When it dies, each player mills 3 cards.
Mm,
So I don't like the stats for the mana cost.
nope.
Lifelink is nice. Elf cleric could be relevant. The ability just hasn't there hasn't been a ton of mill support or graveyard synergies. There's been some, like Haunting Voyage, but that's a mythic. Um, this is nice with the common that returns creatures from your graveyard to your hand when it attacks. But it's not super supported. It's not a super supported theme like it was in the last set.
No, and the 1/3 is just the set seems low enough to the ground where we're seeing curve toppers at 5, tons of aggression, the 1/2 first striking bird, lots of token generators, enough anyway. A lot of things that leave behind 2/2s or 1/1s that are just going to eat this. Overall, I think 3/1s are not looking great in this format.
Yeah, I need a very specific reason to play this card, whether it be a ton of graveyard synergies or a ton of elf or cleric synergies, and we haven't seen them yet.
Yeah, and the lifelink's pretty small considering it's likely to only trigger once.
Yeah, agreed. So this is a like a 1/5.
I put it at a 1/5, yes.
Yeah.
Poison the Cup. So it's a 3 mana instant cast, destroy target creature. If the spell was foretold, scry 2. Foretold costs 1 extra, so you're basically playing 1 for the scry effect over 2 turns, which gives you the flexibility to actually cast it for cheaper if you have like mana sitting around that you're not going to use, and then you get the nice added bonus, which I think is really huge. And a lot of times when you're sitting on a removal spell like that, you're just casting nothing for several turns, so you're likely to have that 2 mana.
Yep, the other nice thing about Foretell in this card is it makes it splashable. Because it's single black instead of double black.
Absolutely, I agree with that. So this card is our premium removal. This is much better than the other one. Do we dare say 4/5, or is this just still 4? You think? I personally think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's still a 4. It's better than the other one, but it doesn't exile. The Foretold Scry is nice. I think I just tend to keep these cards right around 4, unless you're talking like 1 mana type spells like a Murderous Cut that are ultra efficient.
So the foretell, you have to cast it on your turn because it goes upside down. So it's not it's a sorcery speed for the foretell, and then you can flip it for whatever the type is for the card that you're playing. So when you say I'm gonna flip this at instant speed, it has to be an instant.
Yep. The initial card is like half a sorcery, right? It's only your turn, but it can be done at instant speed on your turn, although I guess in response to instant speed discard, I don't know.
Priest of the Haunted Edge. It is a zombie cleric. We've seen a bunch of those. Sacrifice Priest of the Haunted Edge. Target creature gets neg X until end of turn, where X is the number of snowlands you control. Activate this ability anytime you could activate a sorcery. So sorcery speed removal, not a huge fan. It's a 1/of with a huge requirement. I mean, in a snow deck, you're still likely only to get like neg 3, and it's an 0/4 for 2. Not in love with it.
No, I'll play this if I can reliably get 3 snowlands out. But outside of that, I mean, in any other deck, if I can't reliably get 3, it's unplayable completely.
Yeah, I feel like even if I still can get 3, I would still like literally any other removal. If I'm light on it, sure, but otherwise...
Yeah, the fact that it has to sit on the board and they can see it coming, because you can't, it has to be a sorcery and it doesn't have haste or anything. It's a tap effect. Yeah, it's bad removal, but it is removal.
All right, I put it at a 1. We'll put the upside marker on it if you are, balls deep in snowlands, but...
Yep, that sounds right to me. We got Raise the Draugr next. 1 and a black instant, and choose 1. You can return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand, or return 2 target creature cards that share a creature type from your graveyard to your hand.
It's cheap, and I think there's going to be a lot of overlap. You'll be able to get 2 a lot, and it's instant speed. You could do it end of turn.
Yeah, if this was sorcery speed, I wouldn't like it nearly as much.
Like
But the fact that you can do this at instant speed, this card is at worst a 1-for-1 for a really good target you want, or a 2-for-1 for either for at least 2 medium targets.
and it seems so cheap. 2 mana.
Yeah, for 2 mana. Yeah, this card's very efficient now. Just like all of these type of raise dead type cards, you don't want like 3 of them in your deck, because if you draw them early, they're just dead cards with nothing in your yard. But
Agreed.
but the first one is very good, and I'd probably play the second one too.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't think it's gonna be hard to get that overlap, because you're gonna be able to get like a human and a zombie cleric, or a human cleric and then a zombie cleric or something. There's gonna be just a ton, and then you've got like a human wizard. So like the overlap between them, you can literally just have any 2 creatures in your deck almost, and then you'll probably get something.
Yeah, I think this card is very good. Probably looking at like a 3.
I put it at a 3, yeah. And I think it goes up the higher quality your creatures are as well.
Yes. Yep,
if you're getting a bunch of 3/3 crabs, it's still great card advantage for dirt cheap, but if anything better than that, then you're home run.
Yep.
All right, Return Upon the Tide. We have a 5 mana sorcery spell. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it was an elf, create 2/1/1 elf creature tokens, and you can foretell this for 1 extra mana overall. It's got to be very specific. It does say to the battlefield, so it's like a raised dead, thing, which is kind of nice. It's sorcery speed, so it's not a gotcha card, unfortunately, like we've seen in the past. Most of the elves that we've seen aren't worth getting back so far, and if you have crazy mythic elf, then it's pretty situational.
That's the biggest problem with this card, is elves tend to be small.
Mm-hmm.
So you're generally paying here 5 mana to get back like a 2 or 3 drop. Now there are going to be times when there might be something that's worth it, but we have to see that at in green, I'm guessing, or in the rest of black, to see if there's any elves really worth getting back with this.
Most likely, this is going to be a 5 mana return creature to the battlefield, which we have seen playable in previous sets. There has been times where it's been very beneficial to do something like this, and get some crazy big bomb in your yard and then bring it back.
Yeah, it's a second copy of a bomb. In a sense, I mean, you have to have gotten the first copy, but it lets you get a second copy of that. It's good with enter battlefield effects, but you need to have a lot of good targets and be able to get to that late game where you can play this. I think that the elf part, probably you're right. It's probably not going to come up. It's a nice bonus if you have a good elf worth getting back.
So there's an argument in the chat about whether or not when you foretell a card, if it's instant or sorcery. Some person says that it's sorcery speed, and then the rest is about whatever the spell is. So if it's a creature, it's a sorcery. If it's a sorcery, it's sorcery. If it's an instant, it's instant. Someone says, no, that's incorrect. You can cast it anytime on your turn because you have priority. I think the reason you are having that thought is because when you have priority, you're in your main phase and you can cast sorcery speed spells. So you can't cast one of these during combat at instant speed on your turn. It's still a sorcery speed. Marcray. Sorry, I said your name wrong.
Yeah, so basically what the way foretell works is the paying the 2 mana cost is instant speed on your turn, which is a weird concept, but you could play it at any point during your turn that you have priority.
Even during combat, I thought they were sorcery speed.
Well, the 2 mana portion where you just exile it, that portion can be played anytime during your turn. Actually playing the spell is based on the spell's type.
Okay, so I just thought it was instant speed, so I was
it's weird because it's only on your turn, which makes you think sorcery speed, but if there was an instant speed discard spell in the set, you could play it. You could pay 2 in response to that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, you're right. That is like a half and half. It's like a sorcery / instant. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it's something that's going to come up pretty infrequently, but it could come up.
I mean, that would be great in paper play. In arena play, you'll always see it lit up and you won't get to get people, but I love getting people. Oh, did we rate this card? I mean, I'm not in love with it for the average deck.
No, I think I don't mind playing it. So like it's, if you have a lot of good targets, then maybe it's a 2/5 or something. But I think it's probably a 2. It's not a card you're super unhappy with. But you don't want it particularly either.
All right, Rise of the Dread, Marn.
Yeah, Marn, whatever that means.
3/8 X 2/2 zombie berserker creature tokens, where X is the number of creatures that died this turn, and it's instant speed, so that's kind of neat for 3 mana. That's dirt cheap. You can foretell it also for the same cost, so you can use that on their turn if you block a bunch and do some crazy things, block accordingly. They're like, oh, they're not gonna make, like, they attack with their 2 big things and they're like, oh, that's, they're not gonna block with everything. They'll probably chump block 1 or double block 1 and let the other one through. Otherwise they would have to like obliterate their entire board to kill both my creatures. And if they do, it would be like 2 for 5. I'm fine with that. And then you're just like, haha, surprise, I get 7 1/1 or 7 2/2s or whatever. That's a big deal. This card's great, I think.
Yeah, I think the question on this card is just what is the average number of 2/2s you're going to get with this?
4?
I mean, if the answer is 4, then this card is great. If it's 2, it's still playable. It's still 3 mana instant speed for 2/2s. But it's not as great. I think a lot of it's just going to depend on how big do the board states get.
I mean, it's similar to like a board clear, right? Like it's going to take a little setting up. You just can't cast it the turn you get it. But I don't think it's hard to make a 2 trades, right? That's pretty common.
Yeah, it's not the hardest thing in the world to set up.
I think average is probably 4 because it counts yours and theirs, right? It's not just.
Yeah, I think 4 creatures dying in a turn outside of a board wrath is less common than you might think.
What?
But it will certainly happen, and it's not a crazy scenario.
I attack with 2 creatures and they block and then they trade all the time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more of, I don't know. I see these type of cards, not this specifically, and they always feel actually playing them harder to set up than they should be. Don't get me wrong, I'm playing this card because if I get a single trade, it's still worth it. For 3 mana 2/2. But
there's so, and then even if they attack with just 1 creature, a lot of times it's a double block situation, which is 3. I think.
Yeah, I think 3 is probably an average number.
I think you're comparing the bare minimum with the average.
No, I don't think 2 is the bare minimum. I think 3 is probably more likely the average. In which case, it's still a very good card.
I think 2 is the bare minimum, and it can go up to like 6+, making. I mean, that's going to be very obscure. But when the floor is so low or so high at 2, it's not that hard to get to 4. I think, but maybe I'm wrong. I still think it's pretty good.
I think it's good too. I mean, I think we're quibbling over the upside on the card. Not it's certainly good. I'm never going to cut this card. I'm always going to play it because of that. Because there is an upside. I just think it's less likely to happen. I still think the card's a 3 to 3/5.
Board wipes are rare and limited, but that's not really what I'm talking about either. I'm just talking about anytime I attack with 2 creatures, which is more often than attacking with 1 creature for me. I gave it a 4/5.
Okay.
You're in that 4 range?
I'm in like the 3/5 range.
Wow. Rune of Mortality. It's the black rune aura that we see with the whole theme of. It's play, draw a card. It gets Death Touch, and then you can also put it onto an equipment.
Yeah. I mean, it's the continuing the cycle. The blue one is still definitely the best so far. Death Touch is, I think, better than the white one cycles, so it's not a dead card, but it's not exciting. This is 1/5 to a 2. I'm fine with it as like my 22nd, 23rd card, but I'm not looking to play it.
I don't think I'm looking to play it unless there's some way I can abuse the death touch if my creature pings or something like that. Or if I produce tokens and there's a ton of things, I'm like, yeah, if I can get this death touch and like run it under a bus plus the card replaced itself, then that's fine. But if I'm putting this on any creature and it trades for something, I'm not super happy about it.
Yeah, this is one of the ones that might be better if there's equipment that are cheap to equip.
Yeah,
to actually put on there.
All of these are substantially better if you think you can consistently put it onto an equipment, because then it stays. Then you get that, lasting ability, but the ability seems small enough to where I'm not usually wanting to put that on an individual creature itself. And so far, all the equipments we've deemed like, marginally playable.
Yeah, they've all been too expensive. You need something that can equip for one.
All right, so we have a Skemfar Avenger. It's an elf berserker for 2. It's a 3/1, so it's the stats where we would expect to see for 2 mana for a 3/1. Whenever another non-token elf or berserker you control dies, draw a card and lose a life. That seems fine.
Yeah. It's a 3/1, which is vulnerable, but you don't have to be attacking with this, so that's fine. This does not have to get into combat at all. You need a reasonable quantity of elves or berserkers, but at worst it's a 2 mana 3/1, which is playable on its own. So I like this card. This is probably a 3 with some pretty high upside.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have the synergy for it, right? Whenever another, it doesn't even count itself.
Yep.
So I mean, I'm in the 3 range.
Yeah. I like 3, and in the right deck this could be much higher.
Yeah, and also in the wrong deck it could be much lower.
Yeah.
Yep. It could just end up being a 2 mana 3/1, which is like a 2.
Yep. I agree.
I think that's like the most simple card that's had the biggest range for us so far.
Yeah, I agree.
Most of the ranges have all been like snow stuff.
Yep.
That hinge on like really obscure stuff.
Agreed. And we move on to Skemfar Shadow Sage. It's a 2/5 for 3 and a black. It's an elf cleric. And when Skemfar Shadow Sage enters battlefield, choose one. Each opponent loses X life, where X is the greatest number of creatures you control that have a creature type in common, or you gain X life, where X is the same trigger. Same calculation. So at absolute worst, if this is the only creature that ETBs, it's a 4 mana 2/5 that either they lose 1 or you gain.
Yes.
And if you have any sort of other creature that's an elf or a cleric, or any pair of warriors, or 3 of anything, it just goes up from there. But its ceiling probably isn't super high, because you're unlikely to have X
6
equals 7.
Yeah.
Like you're probably looking at
2.
2 or 3 is your most likely numbers.
And it doesn't drain like most things. Like in the last set, we had the cleric that drained for that amount, for however many clerics for however many party members you had. But the ceiling on that was technically 4. But how likely is it you're going to have that many elves anyway? This one doesn't technically have a ceiling, but it's just not very likely that you will go beyond that 4 to begin with. So it's very one-sided. I like this card much less.
Yeah, I agree. The fact that it doesn't drain is a big deal. I'll play this if I really want elves. If I need elves for something.
Yeah.
But otherwise, this is a
2/5 for 4 is not the worst. So if you've got any other synergies with this, or if you, even if you don't have a ton of elf clerics, but you have some things that, want you to have some butt, or I'm trying to think of something that would want you to have an elf cleric, but it itself wouldn't necessarily mean that your deck is full of them to like also trigger this. That seems kind of obscure.
Yeah, it's unlikely, but
I'm in that 2 range.
Yeah, it's a 2. This is the type of effect, because it's so minimal, that I much like on cheaper cards. I'd almost rather have like a 2 mana 1/1 that does this than a 4 mana 2/5. It's still not good, but the 2 mana 2/1 last set that did it, was good. So
Yeah, I agree with that. We got Skull Raid. Target opponent discards 2 cards. If fewer than 2 cards were discarded that way, you draw cards equal to the difference. So it costs 1 more than a mind drop, but it has the extra clause, which allows you to not get wasted if you draw it late game, which is the main reason I hate these cards. I love this. This is a great change.
100% agree. The worst thing about Mind Rot is drawing it on turn 9 when they're empty-handed.
Agreed.
Here it just becomes yeah. Now at that point it's an expensive divination, but it means it's not dead when it was earlier.
Yes, I love this, and then the fact that you can foretell it is pretty nice as well. It's a bit expensive, but I'm always really low on Mind Rot mechanics compared to other people who do set reviews. And that's a comment I get sometimes is like, well, Ben S said blah, 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 or whatever. And I'm just like, but it's dead 2/3 of the time, right? Like, yeah, it's great in the beginning and it wins you a ton of games, but like, how many games do you draw it and it isn't great? It's nothing. You can still win the game technically, but it is just a blank. And I am so hard on that because it feels like that's more often than it isn't. So
yeah. And not only when it's no cards, like one of the toughest things with Mind Rots is you're trying to catch the last 2 cards out of their hand because you don't want them to have a choice. But sometimes they go from 4 cards down to 1, and then you feel bad because, yeah, you might get a great card, but you've only gotten 1. Well, here that's fine because you're then going to get to draw 1. So it removes so many of the downsides to Mind Rot.
Agreed.
For 1 more mana, and they can be paid in installments. That being said, Mind Rots are still not great.
It depends on the format, how fast it is. Like it was great in the last set, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is better than any Mind Rot we've seen in a long time.
I mean, it depends on the set, right? I think it was really, really good in the last one. And I almost never run them. And I went from running almost none of them to almost running 2 of them if I had them every time. Did you have that experience in Zendikar?
I did, but that was what came with that card was a little bit of it, right? Because it fit into the mill decks and the life gain decks. Because it gained you a life and milled a card.
Yeah, but it was so like minuscule that I didn't find that was super relevant. I think it has a lot to do with how long the games are going in that, and how much draw there is in a format.
Agreed. I think that's more important. I think you're right on that.
So
it was definitely better in the last set than it has been.
The longer the games are going and the more ability that people are having to draw cards, but then all the cards are more evenly matched, which is drawing the game out, makes it so that the lifespan of that card and when you can draw it and when it is relevant is just, double or triple the time, makes it less likely to be a dead spell. And that's what's important to me.
Yeah, I think another thing that makes a big difference on the value of Mind Rot is how many mana sinks there are and how much extra lands matter, where if making them discard like their 6th land is actually relevant.
That's true. Like a set with kickers or something, maybe.
Set with kickers, set with landfall, like the last set. That's another reason why it didn't feel bad making them lose a land a lot of times because that land had value.
Not only that, is oftentimes they had extra cards in their hand because they were picking them back up. So they were always having something going on in their hand. So like they go down to 1 card, but then they play this thing that picks up 2 lands. They play a land, trigger their guy, hit you with it, but then they've got 1 blank and a land, and then you're not only getting the card, you're also preventing the next trigger from happening, which is pretty big.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think I don't know, I put this at like a 3. It feels good to me, but I don't know how well it's going to play out at 4 mana.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're very right that the Mind Rots are very format dependent. I think on its face, leaving format out of it, this is the best one we've seen in a while, but this type of card, it's really hard to do that.
Yeah, we really like this, but who knows? All the games could be over by turn 4, and then this is just fucking irrelevant.
Yeah, if this is a very aggressive format, then this card is just bad. Because you might get to draw 2, but you're dead.
All right, moving right along. We have Terrig's Shadow? Tergrid. Why can't I say this? Tergrid's Shadow. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures with foretell for 5 mana.
Yeah, edict effects. You always question how good they're going to be. Once you get to 2, makes it a little easier to think you're going to get at least something good out of it.
But it's a little scary, right? Because you have to either have no creatures or you have to have a ton of crappy creatures, and they have to have no crappy creatures. It's a lot of ifs.
There are a lot of ifs. The fact that it's an instant is nice, because you could play it like after you can make some bad trades, double blocks or something to leave them with 2 and you have none, and then you can, get 2 good creatures with it, or there are ways to manipulate it. But yes, there are. This is very board state dependent.
The fact that it is instant means you don't waste your hand, so it's really nice. You can leave them with 1 creature on the board, you with nothing on the board essentially. You can like even make a trade, and then you let them hit you with their 1 creature. Second main phase, they play their other creature, and you can get them without actually having wasted any of your mana. So I think you're right that the instant is very key here, but it is going to take a ton of setup and a lot of oomph to make this valuable. A lot of times it's going to be super tricky to play.
Yeah, it's also a card that gets better the more removal you have in your deck, because you're likely to have smaller board states.
Yeah, this is pretty good if you've got smaller removal too, like a ton of like things that kill like 2 CMCs or creature with power 3 or less, things like that. It makes this card much more valuable, because you're just likely to hit their top end stuff. I will say this is not very good if you are in the blue-white range because of all of the auras you want to be running as well. Things like this makes your auras kind of dead.
Yep. But again, right on the flip side, it's good against decks that play those cards, because they're generally going to have fewer larger, buffed creatures.
Yeah, you're basically negating their removal spell by killing their creatures with this, and then just getting rid of your creature that was already essentially dead. So yeah, if you're not running the blue-white auras, this is great against them. I agree with that. Yeah. So what are we thinking for this card?
I think this card's like a 2/5. I'm probably always going to play one of them. Not going to take it super highly. I'm going to probably play it, be happier with it, I think, in sealed than in draft, as I typically am with slower cards.
I can agree with that. I mean, it's going to be so wildly dependent. If I've got a bunch of puny dudes, I'm happy to run it. If I've got a ton of removal and not a lot of creatures, I'm happy to run it. But if I'm in the middle, like dead middle, it gets a lot more iffy, I think.
Yeah, this is a card you are absolutely going to want to sideboard out in certain matchups in best of 3. Don't be just because it's removal doesn't mean it has to stay in your deck for game 2 if you're playing against tokens or a fast aggro deck.
All right, we got a big rare card.
Yep, we got Varragoth Bloodsky Sire. It's 2 and a black for a 2/3 demon rogue with Death Touch. And Boast, pay 1 and a black. Target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top of it. So your Boast ability is like a 2-mana Vampiric Tutor or Imperial Seal, where you just get to tutor the best card in your deck to the top. Why it's target player, I don't know. I can't imagine why you would target your opponent with this.
You just put lands on the top of their deck every turn.
No, but they search it.
Ooh, oh. Target player searches.
Like they would get to put the best card.
2HG, the best format. It's the only casual format I like. 2HG, baby.
2HG, I guess EDH as well. But
EDH doesn't exist. That's fine. 2HG is the shit, though. Let me tell you.
Yeah. So I mean, the Boast you're going to be targeting yourself. The 3-mana 2/3 Death Touch means that your attack, you're not going to. You might lose this in attack, but you're going to trade. So, at worst case, you're looking at, 2/3 that trades off with an opponent's creature and puts your best card on top of your deck. So I don't know. I think this is
it's fine vanilla stats, and it does the thing. If it lets you, even if you only use it once, it also has Death Touch, so it's going to trade. So it's going to get you your big bomb. It's going to trade for whatever. They can't just like eat it. And it's a 2/3, which is going to bounce a lot of times early games. So I mean, I think you're going to get really good value out of it. I'm pretty happy to run this.
Yeah, and they're forced to answer it, right? They can't just it's a 2/3, I'll take 2, because you're just going to get to keep putting your best card on top of your deck
until they mill it.
Yeah. So, this is because you're probably a lot of times only going to get 1 activation out of this. It's not a huge bomb, but it's a card that does have to be answered.
So here's the thing about this card is range is super wide because its value goes up based on the value of your deck. If this is the best thing in your deck, it's not doing that much work. If this is the worst card in your deck then this card becomes so much better. Right? If you've got removal that you can dig for, if you've got big bomb creatures to dig for, then it's great. If you're just like, yeah, I'm going to get this 3/3 crab and put it on top of my deck, that's really not that great if your deck is just full of things. Yeah, you can fade a couple of lands by doing this if that's the case, but like, It has a range based on the quality of your deck, as opposed to a synergy card that's based on like specific types of cards. This is just based on card quality.
Yep, card quality and to some degree, I guess the stage of the game. Because if you're late game, you may have gone through a lot of your best cards already, but that's not always true. You might still have a good one in your deck. So maybe that's not true. Maybe it's
Well, the numbers
maybe
say, late game,
yeah,
which is about midway through the deck, you should have gone through about half of your best cards.
True. you are correct.
All right, so I gave it 3-5, but I think it is as low as a 3 because it's going to be fading some lands, and at worst, just on stats alone, I think it's a 2-5 because it's a 2-3 for 3 with death touch alone. I think is pretty much a 3. And then it goes all the way up, I think, to 4-4-5. It's going to win you the game if you have some good stuff to search for.
Yep, 100% with you on that.
We got a 2-3 flyer for 4 with death touch and haste and foretell. The foretell cost is actually the same, so it's just some flexibility. It has haste, so it's going to do some good work for you. It's a 2-3, so death touch is a little relevant. You can kill, 2 3s, 1 2s, 2 4s. We saw a 2-5, I think. So it'll still live, and it's an angel cleric with some good synergies. I think this card's great.
Yeah, the 3 toughness is really nice, especially against we haven't seen it yet, but what's typically the green, spider, that is usually like a 1-4 or a 2-4.
Ooh, yeah.
That can't just block it indefinitely yet. We don't know for certain that's in this set, but it is in a lot of sets. Or the
archer elf or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of times you get big toughness, low power reach creatures, defensive reach creatures that this just eats right through. So yeah, I mean it's a slow clock, but it's a clock, and and it's good on defense with 3 toughness. Can eat the 2 power creatures like you said. It's got haste. There's nothing not to like about this card.
Wholeheartedly agree. So a 3 is like filler. I'm happy to run. I think this is slightly better than that personally. I gave it a 3-5.
Yep, I get behind 3-5. I think it's between 3 and 3-5. It can be either, but I think you're probably right. It leans higher.
It has so much going for it.
Yeah.
Village Rites. We've seen this before. It's a 1 mana, sack a creature at instant speed, draw 2. So a lot of times your best case scenario is A, sack like a crap token, or B, do it in response to removal. So then you're really just kind of getting that free value. It's basically an O for 2 because your card itself is negating their card, and then you get 2 cards on top. So, or yeah. A 1 for 2, I guess, because your creature dies too, huh?
Yeah, you want this in in decks like you're saying. You get tokens, like the 2 mana 1/1 that makes their opponents discard, or you're right, best cases in response to the removal spell, or getting something that's been bound in gold.
Yeah, bound in gold's a good one too. I mean, that kind of counts as a removal spell.
Yeah. Yep.
Also, there are quite a few creatures that leave behind something. Get a 1/1 flyer when this dies. That's not a terrible target for either. So I think that makes this set a little bit better for Village Rites than some of the other sack cards we've seen in the past. Still not a huge fan of it, just because it is super situational.
Yeah. I'm just putting this at a 2. Playable. Definitely something you can bring in and out of the sideboard too against like a blue-white that's going to lock down a lot of your creatures.
Or anything that's got heavy removal.
Or anything with a ton of removal, but yeah, it's good.
Efer says it's always good in Omniscience drafts.
It is very good in Omniscience drafts.
That is true. Way down. So this is the Grasp, Myra's Grasp. Essentially, I think it's a sorcery, an additional exile a creature card from your graveyard. Target creature gets -3/-3. So Myra's Grasp was actually an enchantment that you can bring back or whatever, but it's the similar ability for 1 mana sorcery speed. You have to have a creature in your graveyard too, which is a little bit iffy, and there's been a ton of things that want to remove creatures from your graveyard so far, like the 3/7. So it's just another drain on your resources in your graveyard.
Yeah, this is definitely worse than like a Myra's Grasp, even though it's cheaper because it's a 1 mana spell, but it's tough to play early game unless you have you've gotten some early trades or you're aggressive. But it's still a quality removal spell. -3/-3 is still going to kill like 4 drops later in the game.
I will say that the Orzhov has seemed very, very aggressive, so having early creatures in your yard does not seem unrealistic, and this is going to be cheap removal to help you keep your foot on the gas. This is sort of weird. This is one of the only times we've seen Orzhov in the last couple of years be very, very aggressive. They seem to pair very well, and a cheap removal spell like this, where the requirement should be easily met in an aggressive deck, is kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing this now. Unlike some of these type removal spells, there is probably a limit to how many you can play just because of the extra cost. But that limit is still, 2 to 3.
Yeah.
As opposed to Mire's Grasp, where you could have given the 8, and I probably would have played them.
So you play the guy that when it dies, it leaves the 1/1, right? And then so you village rights it, and then you weigh them down with the other thing, and then you poke them in the face for 1. Value, baby.
Exactly. So yeah, it's quality removal. It's not on the level of the other black removals that we've seen, the 3-mana instant or the 4.
Oh,
3
not
or 4
even
mana
close.
instants. Not even close. But I'm playing it. I mean, those were in the 4s. This is probably a 3.
Yeah, I'm in the 3 to 3/5 range, depending. I mean, this is going to be heavily dependent upon how many creatures in your deck. If you're a blue-black control with 8 to 11 creatures, this is going to go down substantially in value. If you're the Orzhov with 18 creatures, you're in business. Run as many as you want, I would say, almost. Yeah, I mean, I'm in that 3 range with a bit of play, depending. Make sure you guys are considering the overall composition of your deck when deciding whether or not this is the right removal spell for you.
Yep. All right, and we're on to the final black card.
Oh yeah, this one was an hour and 20 minutes. Hour and 30. We're a bit light on this one.
Black had a lot of cards with a lot of text.
They all had so much text. Wither Crown. It's an aura for 2. Enchant creature has base power 0, and has at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose a life unless you sacrifice this creature. Most of the time they're just going to sacrifice the creature unless it's got a really nutty ability, right?
Yeah, so this is kind of awkward removal. It's great against just beaters, that aren't providing value, like vanilla or French vanilla creatures.
French vanilla?
You haven't heard that term?
I mean, in my coffee, yeah.
French vanilla, it's a term. I mean, it's a vanilla creature with just like a regular keyword. So just like a 3/4 flyer is a
How
French
have I
vanilla.
never heard that?
I don't know, but it is definitely a term.
It makes sense. It's a vanilla card with just a little flavor.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's great against those type of cards, but something with a good activated ability or good static or triggered ability, they're probably going to be willing to take for at least a few turns, to before they sacrifice it. So removal, but situational.
I definitely agree with this assessment.
Yep. And I'm playing this. I'm playing the first one of these probably in every black deck, unless I've got a bunch of other better removal spells. But you don't want too many of them. Just like the other enchantment type things, even if you do get like a 6/6 with it, they might be willing to live with it for a turn or two if they have a chance to blink it or something like that. So
that makes sense.
I'm playing the card though. It's worse than a lot of the other removals. It's probably like a 2/5, the first one of these.
I think it's worse than all of the other removals.
Yeah, I guess I was counting the terrible 0/4 snow creature as the only one. This is better than.
Okay, yeah, this is probably better than the 0/4. Yeah, I'll give you that. I wasn't thinking of him. Yeah, I'm in that 2 range. I'd have to be really desperate to want to run this. I think it could be a big sideboard card against creatures with huge green monsters, where you're just like, okay, I mean, it's basically just a 2-mana removal because they have no reason to keep the big beater, especially if I'm like, blue-black fires or something. Then this card just is very cheap removal. But in the average deck where you're just like, okay, maybe you hit like a 3/3, or maybe you're hitting a creature with an ability and they take 2 damage, get to use the ability, which is great for them for 2 more turns, and then sack it, and you really didn't do much, and that ability over 2 turns could really screw you. I'd have to be real desperate, I think.
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on it than you, but not much. I'm never playing a second one, except out of the sideboard against like a red-green beats deck.
Yeah.
Something like that. So.
The bigger your opponent's creatures are, the better this card gets. The less, ability heavy the deck is, the better this gets.
Agreed.
All right, guys. So that is the end of Black.
I'd like to give a special thank you to those of you who have signed up for our Patreon. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. This content is also sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. and KMC Sleeves. If you guys enjoyed the content, consider checking out the links below and using our discount codes. Thank you guys again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.